Good evening. Welcome to Athens City Council. Tonight is Monday, April 26, 2010. This evening, City Council is meeting in a special session. We do have a quorum with 6 members of 7 present. On to ordinances for third reading. Ordinance 4010 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 13, General Offenses, Chapter 1307, Miscellaneous Offenses, to add Section 130709, Persons on Roof, and declaring an emergency. Member Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt Ordinance 4010.
Second.
I just want to make it clear that this ordinance does not apply to sunbathers or people doing maintenance on roofs. The police are not going to be going around ordering those folks off a roof. There could be a problem if it's in your lease and the lease says you're not allowed on the roof, but the police don't have anything to do with that, and they will not be doing that. This ordinance does say that no person shall occupy a roof or a porch roof of any structure when police officers are citing or have cited the occupants for a violation of a city noise, disorderly conduct, or nuisance party ordinance, or a disturbance is taking place and police have ordered persons to leave the roof or porch roof. That is Section A of the ordinance. Section B says that a violation of Section A is usable for determining a nuisance party violation. A violation of this would be a minor misdemeanor. If the offender would, however, persist in violating after reasonable warning or request to desist is made, it would be a misdemeanor of the 4th degree.
Is there further discussion? Mayor Weil.
Just to keep this short, but one of the frustrating things about, and I'm sure some of you have been on the safety teams at Halloween, is that there's really no control over trying to get people off the roofs at one point or another. Again, to reiterate, this is only going to be in a citation mode if there's actually police coming to it for a disturbance. But it's really disconcerting when you see somebody up, a bunch of people up on a roof in the middle of the night, dancing along, and really you could say, gee, that's not safe, but and as a safety team, we wouldn't have that power anyway. But the fact is, I'm glad there's possible tools in place for it. Just because it is, we just keep them from hanging out the cross street windows would be even better. But one thing at a time.
Further comment? Member Gosney.
And right with the mayor, along with what the mayor said, this is a proactive public safety measure that the city can take to protect the safety of residents in the city. Definitely a good thing for us to be bringing forward for consideration.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 4110 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 11, Business Regulations, enacting Chapter 1110, Contractor Registration. Member Fall.
Thank you. I move to adopt 4110.
Second.
This has been discussed for many, many weeks now. It's looking at registering contractors within the city. The major reason for this is for looking at tax collections, making sure that all the income tax are collected from the contractors that do business. There's also an issue of being able to be fair for those contractors who have the correct registration, paying their taxes, paying their workers' compensation, and also it helps to protect people because they can ask for registration, and it may weed out some of those people who go by and ask to shovel sidewalks and those sort of things, of people who may not be people who do good jobs or who are really that are fly-by-night. We've discussed about we have made the difference, reduce the amount of money it costs to register, to have the registration, and all the different tax, the cutoff points that are in effect for taxes are in effect for this registration.
Other comments? Yes. Member Butler.
Thank you. I guess I just wanted to comment before we voted. Is that proper? This is the right time? Although I respect the merits that were acknowledged, I still have some concerns about this particular piece of legislation. And please correct me if I'm wrong. Is $75 a yearly fee, or is that a one-time only?
A yearly.
It is a yearly fee. Okay. Which is a concern of mine. I do appreciate that the fee had been lowered from the initial $100 amount. I still think that $75 over a person's lifetime working in the city is a substantial amount. So I do have some concerns. I do feel that this may be affecting a little guy or little gal that happens to be doing some work within the city, and that concerns me as well, too. Thank you.
Other comments? Member Gosnell.
And similar to what Member Butler said, I understand some of the reasons for bringing this forward, and I appreciate the thoughtful amendments that have been made to it. For me, I think someone that does work in the city professionally as a full-time job should possibly be required to register in a manner such as this. But for people that do occasional part-time work, I don't think this should be necessary.
Other comments? Mayor Wild, did you want to go?
Again, $75, I look at that and say, I don't know how much you get charged for having people work on your house. I don't know what the charges are. I know the conversation we had last time during committee, we talked to two people who got up and spoke about this registration, and I think one was an electrician who said he charges $40 an hour. I'm sure that's a union electrician, I imagine. That's standard rate. That means in a couple hours he's made it back. The people I know who do it on the odds and ends, odd job situation, I think they're charging 15 to 20 an hour. Okay, so that's what I'm seeing. Okay, the fact is, when you talk about the little guy, it's probably where you're going to have the most problem. People who aren't qualified to take on an activity and do it well. I mean, I have done mechanics on my house. I've worked on my house, and I know I've also made it not square at times. So I'm aware of the fact that that's where the slip and slide is the worst in terms of the amateur or semi-amateur. And again, having sat here for many years, since 93 or 92, about every 3 years somebody would come in front of council with a tale of woe and say, what can we do? And most of the time, council just nods their head and say, take it to civil court. And I've seen it on zoning board of appeals too. So there's a need for some of this, just not recouping income tax, which of course you just have to look at our budget and know that needs to be done too.
Sure.
Member Sands?
I just was kind of, I was going to respond to something the mayor said in an offhand way. Council would say, take it to civil court, which is essentially what we would have to say now also, because we don't have any penalties for other than non-registration. We're not keeping track of who does a good job and who doesn't, but we're simply offering a registration. Yeah, we do have an address for this guy if you need to call him back, or this girl.
Member Fall?
I'd like to point out that this has a lot of contractor buy-in. I think that the fairness issue is a big issue for a lot of people who do work in Athens. And there's, a lot of people who do, and I think that the tax issue will get the people out of the system who are the little guys, and there's age cutoff, and there's the amount of days, and there's the amount of money. And so I think that that's the fairness issue, I think, is a huge thing, and everybody who's contacted me about this, who are contractors, say that this is something that's been needed and that they're fully supportive of it, and so I think that that's something, it's rare that we do something that both administration and council and business and citizens all agree on, and I think that this is something that we've gotten a lot of buy-in with, so I urge passage of it.
Yes.
I just want to remind everyone that the fact is, anyone who works, whether we have a registration through the code office, who works more than 12 days in the city, is supposed to register and pay their taxes anyway. That's in the tax code section of our ACC. And so this is just an added way to pick people up to get that, but that's already the law, and they should be paying. And I think that your neighbor boy who comes and mows your lawn is just probably going to fly under the radar. I also think that someone from out of town could come in 2 days a month for the summer, 3 or 4 months, and still be under the 12 days. There's just a lot of ways of looking at it. There are a lot of occupations listed there, and we seem to be concentrating on, the kids and mowing lawns. But there are a lot of other occupations out there that do a lot more costly work for people and need to be registered. There needs to be a way just to track them. As Jim said, we're not evaluating anything, but to track them, and they should be paying their money. There are a lot of people who are already out there registered with us paying their taxes. I pay my taxes. I think everybody else should too.
Do we have audience members wishing to speak with this?
Yeah,
We need to ask you to come up to the microphone so that everybody out in TV land will also get to hear what you have to say. And if you could tell us your name and who you represent.
Tony Ferry, and I represent myself. I'm just kind of curious about this contractor thing. Would that include somebody doing work for themselves at their own home? Because if they're hiring an HVAC guy, an electrician, or a plumber, that would actually, under the definition of the law, a contractor would make them a contractor then. So I was kind of curious about how that would affect, because the actual definition of a contractor is one who agrees to undertake a project, especially in construction. So if indeed you're a homeowner and now you're able to do the same amount of work that an actual contractor is doing, then you're actually kind of taking away work from the contractor and not having to pay go into the same bylaws of this ordinance.
I don't
So I
know
would
that
say
I'm
by
the right one to
definition-
speak to it, but my guess is I'm not hearing money changing hands.
Right. I mean, do you mean if you are the person who's hiring all the different people and managing?
If it was my own home,
Right,
I wanted to
and
do
you
work.
decide to do your own work?
yeah, subcontracted plumber
But that's
and an
not
electrician.
covered under a tax. This follows our tax laws and our income tax receipt laws. And as a homeowner, you are able, if you want to go and do painting and such by yourself, you are not liable.
What if I
under
subbed
tax
it
law.
out?
Then it's the person who you sub it out to who would be responsible under this registration,
To be registered.
to be registered.
So if they did the work wrong according to the code office, then who's the ultimate responsibility fall on? Would it be with the subcontractor or the homeowner?
This has nothing to do with the quality of work. It's to make sure that people pay their income tax, that they have.
Actually, earlier you guys did say that it had to do with the quality of work. You said this was to...
That was my statement.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Jim
Paul.
Sands corrected me on that.
Okay. Well, I was just
So-
kind of curious about how, if anybody, if I wanted to come in and just say I'm doing this for myself, and
Yeah,
I
but
built
that's not
this
covered.
huge big building,
Right.
then I wouldn't have to abide by that ordinance because it's on my property and I'm doing it for myself, right?
Right, but you would still have to abide by, if you're doing a commercial building, you'd still have to abide by the commercial building rules and those sort of things. This has more to do with taxes, making sure that you have insurance, and that you're paying workers' compensation. And if you're doing work for yourself, if you're painting and doing your own landscaping, and that is totally not in the realm of discussion for this registration.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks.
Does that help clear it up?
A little bit.
Great.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak
Yes.
before council?
I was just going to clarify that. It is a little confusing because you are a contractor. But if you think of anybody else doing this, if I wanted to add on to my house, or we had our roof replaced or get it painted, the people I hired are the contractors that would need to be registered. I'm not a contractor because I've hired people to work on my own home.
Okay. Are we ready? All those in favor of the ordinance?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
The ordinance passes 4-2. On to ordinances for second reading. Ordinance 4310.
4210.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss one? I did. Thank
First
you.
of the three you're skipping, right?
Yeah. Ordinance 4210, an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 31 Building Regulations. No one would have noticed. Member Paul.
I urge adoption for 4210. This is a ordinance amending the city code, Title 31, which is about a 35-page section of our city code, to amend that to where we are adopting the Ohio codes for building, the building code for Ohio. It helps simplify things and makes it, people already follow those building codes according in other jurisdictions, and it helps, just makes Athens that much easier to do building.
Member Sands.
Essentially, it erased 45 pages
yes.
of Athens language and replaced it with
Right.
with the state building.
With the state building code.
Other comments? All those in favor of the ordinance?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Now on to ordinances for second reading. Ordinance 4310 is an ordinance granting a revocable license to the owner of 22 Ohio Avenue to rebuild a fence on the city right-of-way. Ordinance 4410 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an annexation agreement with the Board of Trustees of Athens Township for property located on Old Peach Ridge Road.
Mr. President,
Member
I was
Bain.
wondering, Mayor, if we would have a firm statement on 4410, a firm statement, I don't think it's slip-prone anyway, but about whether we're talking about more than one or one single dwelling unit, because it seems to me that it's fairly close to where I live, and there have been problems with the with the sewer up in that area, and I wanted to make sure that we're not, that it is for a single one. And back in the day when we used to do those more non-expedited annexation agreements, we would say, okay, we're annexing this and we can provide sewer. And I just want to make sure that we can, in fact, if it goes more than one unit. And the person asking us alluded to the fact that she might need a couple extra lots. And so, in other words, I would, by the next reading, by the final reading, I think I need to know that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you want to know if it has the capacity for more than one lot?
Right, or if it would be a problem in either water or sewer. I don't see water as a problem, but sewer could be a problem.
I was under the impression it was capacity, but I'll check.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, for one is what we thought, but then there was a mention of more than one.
Yes.
Other comments? Ordinance 4510 is an ordinance approving an amendment to the solid waste management plan of the Athens-Hawkins Solid Waste District for implementation of a generation fee and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 4610 is an ordinance closing a portion of Court Street on Friday, June 18th and Friday, August 20th, 2010 for a cruise-in. Ordinance 4810 is an ordinance providing for the issuance of $1 million of notes by the City of Athens, Ohio, in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying part of the cost of acquiring and constructing improvements to State Street and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 4910 is an ordinance providing for the issuance of $155,000 of water system revenue notes 13th, 2010 renewal by the City of Athens, Ohio for the purpose of paying litigation costs and renewing notes previously issued for the purpose and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 5010 is an ordinance authorizing street paving and repairs. Ordinance 5110 is an ordinance adopting a bicycle and pedestrian plan for the City of Athens, Ohio. Ordinance 5110 is the last ordinance on our agenda, keeping in mind this is a special session of council, which has a very limited agenda. Having addressed all items on our agenda, we stand adjourned. Now moving on to a series of three different committee meetings. The first one being Planning and Development. Committee Chair, Chris Ball.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to open up the discussion to council members for the rezoning of Uptown from B2D to the, from B2 to the B2D. Do people have suggestions, comments?
You're going
Nancy?
to start with council, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, I did some research. Actually, Debbie did it for me, and I want to thank her for that, just to make sure I understand or understood what was going on here. I've been through it a few times. The last time, I believe, we sort of ended without doing anything because we made an offer which was refused. Okay, so just a few comments in general so you understand where I'm coming from. First of all, my job is to represent the Third Ward. That's business for me in this case. And the Third Ward is the ward where the people came from last week who were talking about this. 1968, we first had developed a comprehensive plan under Mayor Shepherd. It was 03069. This came out of it. In that case, the area in question, the B2 Downtown Business District, had a 500-foot rule that required business parking according to the table of bulk controls. That would mean that the businesses would have to provide off-street parking according to a square foot measurement. And it's an old idea, but a good one apparently, or at least I think so. In 1968, it's very important for us to remember, OU had about 18,000 students, and almost all of them, 80% of them, were housed within its dormitory structure. Okay, the next time we had professional input, it was NGG Bohm, who was the flavor of the day back then during the Henniker administration. And they suggested a couple of transition zones north of State Street, stopping at Fern Alley and Rose. I never saw the plan. I only saw the outcomes of it, so I can't really say a bunch more about it. The north was zoned B3, and the south became B2D. And the difference were lower heights, slight side and rear setbacks. Not a big deal because it was all built out, and that's still the case. No shops with nighttime operations and other use variations. Retained on-site commercial parking requirements, so our 500-foot thing that was in 1969, 1982 is still there in 95. Signs and bars vary. Now, since that time, it's come to our attention that the restrictions on bars probably are relatively meaningless in the B3 zone. When you go to the Department of Liquor Control, I mean, it's not, they don't care what our zoning code says pretty much. At least that was my experience going to testify for my zone one time. And so despite our zoning code's restrictions, I think it would be hard to enforce it. But that's just my opinion. I've always heard that liquor licenses are preempted by state law, just as power plants are and hazardous waste facilities are. Okay, 2006, we had another change, man. Things started to heat up here. You can see why. In 1995, OU was close to its 1971 student body size, but now it had less than 50% of its students in dormitories. And that's where it starts to go. It even gets better in terms of the number later on. The 2006 changes retained the North Court commercial parking requirement and prohibited residential developments on the first floor. And the pressure to remove that parking requirements continues to this day, as we can see. OU exceeded 20,000 students in 2006, and it's really hard to parse out what is going on in enrollments because they count in people who are online and other things like that. But it housed less than 40% of its students. In 2006, we were carrying on a comprehensive plan. Started with Ed and then Dale and I were the co-conveners, and we sat through numerous meetings on Uptown. The most contentious thing was creating a mall on Court Street. Well, while we were doing the planning process, Mayor Abel had a count done, and I didn't go back and do it because, frankly, I thought it was good enough. What he found was that 10% of OU students lived within an area and the adjacent areas. 10% of OU student body lived in this area. And so in the Uptown area. And I believe Steve Pearson did the counts on housing permits. And so I'm going to advocate that we can change the north block of Court Street to the B2D. That's great. But let's retain the 500-foot parking requirement. Let's reinstate it. Let's ask the Planning Commission to do it. Why I want to do it? I mean, I guess it's a good day to be talking about why high densities are a problem. I mean, we will be able to say that between now and probably the end of the spring quarter. I mean, densities are a problem. First of all, I will say every time I go to and I missed the last one, but every time I go to a meeting, some of my constituents will say to me, "Oh my goodness, there are these marauding bands of people that pull my flowers out and commit mayhem in my area." I think, I'm not a proponent of Calhoun's rats, but I think density is important. I think that we have people living in what would be considered maybe very palatial by standards of many people in this part of the country, housing, but they don't have room to go outside, unless they're standing on their roofs or something, and they don't really have a place to throw a frisbee. And that may not seem important when you're scoring this cool place to live, but after a while, you listen to the students and they say, the students I've known anyway, they may be more studious, "Oh my goodness, it's so noisy," and two-syllable pizza parlor downstairs makes noise till 4 o'clock in the morning. It's a problem. You don't really notice that when you're looking at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, so these are my arguments why, as third ward rep, my business is to try and get my wards the best deal for my ward. This represents and has represented for, let's say, 40 years, almost as long as I've been at OU. Cheapers. Between the major commercial area and the residential area. Call it what you want, but I think that various ways the parking requirement was designated, and it must have been at 3 major planning firms, Kandub and Fleissing, NGG Bohm, and Pogemeyer, all said, basically they didn't say get rid of it. Densities are substantial, but this area has been manageable for business uses, parking, and space for necessary facilities. Some of the business renters are afraid that they will lose their parking space, and I've heard that as well. They're not the owners, they're the renters, and where will I park? I'll have to go park on, guess what? Congress, Grosvenor, Franklin, ground zero for parking problems in the city of Athens during the day. And the most congested streets in Athens will have to accept the 60 to 70 to 80 parking places that are there. Basically, then, I would argue that a read of the past says even when the student body was 80% in dorms, this did not represent a major problem. Now that less than 40% of the students are in dorms and 10% of them live uptown, I think it's dense enough, and I don't want to see that parking requirement, which is what it's all about, go back to being allowed to put residential buildings up in place of those commercial spaces. 80 or so residential units would be there. And that's basically what I would like to do. I'd like to send the recommendation back to the Planning Commission, ask them to reinstate with a sentence, actually ask Debbie what I'd have to do it. My recommendation would be go ahead and within the B2D downtown business district, I thought she was brilliant when she sent this to me, and I realized she took it right out of the blue book. The off-street parking requirement for principal permitted use, that would be the commercial use, may be eliminated if there exists within 500 feet of property line improved public parking areas containing a sufficient number of places required by the table of bulk controls. So that's basically what I would like to request that we do. I know it's sort of a stinky mess, but on the other hand, we've had it again and again. I don't know about a courtesy. Last time we got to this point and said, good, we just want to reinstate the parking requirement, thinking about retaining the parking requirement, not letting it go, in favor of this uniform zone, but with the parking requirement differentiated as it has been for 40 years. But last time the people who wanted it kind of stalked out. We don't want it that way, and that was it. We didn't do it. I think it's time to do it. It's time to rezone it and then ask them to reinstate the parking requirement. I have no idea where the votes are on that, though. I don't think there's votes to pass it as it currently is. And what's a big surprise, right? I think the Planning Commission basically said that already. And so, why not do it? Why not make it a single zone, if that's a reasonable one? You can't ask me what my compromise was, and that's what I'm offering up. I'm not sure it's desirable, but so now you know where I'm coming from. There's enough density uptown. We don't need to increase it. Why should an ancillary use drive the principally permitted uses? Bottom line.
Jim?
I agree with what I think Nancy is saying. But have we ever platted out where the 500-foot line is? Yes?
Last time.
And, okay, we do have that, okay, fine. The
In
other question,
2007, Jim.
the other question that I had was, a couple years ago, our then director of the code office, Steve Pearson, did an inventory of parking spaces that were dedicated for commercial parking in that south end of Court Street, that north end of Court Street. What are those spaces? How are
Somewhere between 60 and 80.
About, actually, about, I think, I thought you said 68. I think Paskey did a study, we had him do a count on
he
it.
redid that?
Yeah.
68, you said?
68. I think he actually extended
I
a little
said
bit
between
towards
60 and 80.
Passion Works too, though. So that's included in Passion Works, which is technically East State Street.
Yeah.
I think he gave that data to the Planning Commission about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So that's how many would be in play, about 68 spaces, about. Again, there's no confirmation that they'd all switch over to non-commercial. When you talk about the wording you have there, almost leaves us a little wiggle room for in terms of dedicated parking spaces. Does that mean somebody could actually end up tearing down a building and putting a parking lot in Court Street?
You're asking me a what-if question. I don't enforce the code. I just vote on it. I don't know
The
what your...
interpretation. All right, well,
No, the one that Debbie gave me was slightly cleaner than that, but it meant the parking garage.
okay. And if I
Because,
remember,
this is pre-parking garage.
if I remember the 500 yards, 500 feet,
500 feet?
did not cover Barron's at the time. I remember them having to go in front of the zoning board of appeals for a variance for that.
And it barely gets to the south side of West State, East
Yeah.
and West State Street, barely.
And I think, as you said, in 2007 or 6, there was a draft ordinance that was floating around.
It was. And I apologize, I've had massive family problems this year, and I had one the day, I was going to come in the day of the last reading, and so I'd have preferred to do it that way, but I couldn't get away from my situation.
And so those parking spaces would come into play. Tell me what you mean. They're suddenly going to become...
If we turned it to B2D all the way up to Carpenter, that the way it's written right now in the code is that you can use the parking garage for your commercial parking if it's all in the same zone, the B2D zone.
Yeah.
The fact is that everything north of West State Street and East State Street, I guess, is in the B3 zone, means they're in another zone, and therefore they're out of the use of the parking garage. If we turn it all to B2D, then they can use the parking garage. Anybody with commercial parking can say, I'm using the parking garage, or not. I mean, they could keep their parking spaces. I had my taxes done on West State Street there, and the guy was saying it's nice to have customer parking there. I suspect Cornwell Jewelers, for instance, probably benefits by having parking in front. Some places would probably give it up, some places wouldn't. So is that what you're asking? What's in play? When I say in play, they could turn it into residential, fill up their
And
apartments.
so my thought was that taking Nancy's idea and going one complicating step further, we would just say, declare, if we made this change, we just declare these commercial spaces, and then the Board of Zoning Appeals could decide later on if the property owner decided that he could better use them or she could better use them someplace else.
Probably, I suspect they'd have to come up with alternative parking rather than...
Well, and that has happened.
Yes.
And I've been on the Board of Zoning Appeals when that happened, when we did approve such a thing. So,
Okay.
but it gets complicated and trying to... Anyway, I started out by saying I agree with Nancy's premise that, yes, let's reinstitute that, change it to B2D. I think that Court Street was, from the beginning of Athens, a commercial street from one end to the other, and commercial activities really can't happen in this northern end without a variance at this point. And so let's just call it what it is.
If you remember, this has been tried a couple times. Some of the reasons why it did not go through, of course, you remember BP at that time was a gas station where B2D would not allow something of that nature to expand or exist in a B2D. It's now technically a convenience store / gas station rather than a garage. I think the freestanding sign has gotten a variance for that, so that falls out. Straub's Plumbing used to be the other major objection at the time, because I think the concept at that time when B2Ds were written, you couldn't have any machinery or machine shop type items in the front window or seen from this many years ago. That's gone too.
I should remember.
In-town body shop would fall into the same area, and that's of course gone as well. So this has changed nature. If you're going to change the B2D, I'd say you'd have to do it at the same time as the parking restriction, mostly because realize in terms of timing, you could get something grandfathered in.
No, I see it as one.
Together.
And they would be
action.
grandfathered, right? Everything that's there is grandfathered.
Yes, but I'm talking about if you turn it to B2D tomorrow,
That one.
and then 2 months from now, we put the 500-foot limit in, and all commercial spaces have disappeared in between. That's another thing entirely.
The other part that I didn't mention actually came up last time, and I think it's pretty clear, anybody who lives up in the hills, that the noise, actually, every time I had to buy a lot of food for the food pantry this week, every time I went to the store, somebody said to me, you had better vote for that noise ordinance. And so, but they all had stories, and I said, well, it's coming back, and we'll have it, and it'll get voted on almost certainly, but, walking backwards. But what they said to me, and several people from Congress Street said, a lot of times they have these noise experiences and they don't even know where they're coming from. And they walk all over. They go down to Arc Street, they go up Mound Street, and they're out in their jammies running around in the middle. I guess it's a testimony to how relatively safe Athens is, although I don't think I would do that. And they say that they find somebody over on Ring Street with the speakers in their front windows. And they go to the door and knock on it and say, you're making a lot of noise. Oh, I didn't even notice it. And they turn them off. But it's just like, it bounces off. We put some more obstacles up there. I mean, I'm not an acoustical engineer, but I think that more stories in some places could create more noise hazard. And right in my neighborhood. And I have an interest in, although I didn't wake up from North High Street, I think it's a problem. I think that, the status, there's a lot to be said for the status quo with respect to the parking requirements. That's where
I think that my take on this is that we have issues with density right now in Athens, and the noise ordinance is a perfect example of that, because we've had an increase in density in the Mill Street and Stewart Street area. And what Nancy has said about lack of green space, lack of backyards, puts everybody out onto the streets. And right now, this area is somewhat of a transition zone for the Congress residential area. And I've been asked several times, if this is like a development versus neighborhood sort of things. But I really don't buy into the development versus neighborhood argument, because we need to have neighborhoods that are viable and livable. And the in-town neighborhoods have to be viable, and I am very concerned that this area is going to turn into from somewhat of a transition area into a high-density area. And right now, something that I see our code lacking is this transition buffer zoning. And we don't have design guidelines. We don't have, right now you could put a bunch of balconies out on Carpenter Street, and that would go right into the Congress area, into that neighborhood. It would spill over into my neighborhood, the Nina neighborhood. I think that there's something that we need to step back and look at large term. I know that the comprehensive plan talked about having all of that uptown neighborhood, the uptown business area zoned as the same thing, but I think the density issue has to be looked at by council and by the planning commission. And it's something that we've been struggling with. The noise ordinance, the roof ordinance is all things that we've been struggling with. And we have to look at the off-site impacts of changing the zone. And so I'd like council to look at those things and whether we need to change the parking. It's not, in my mind, it's not only parking. It's also all these other impacts of increasing zoning, increasing the density in this area, and we need to address this as council and as the planning commission and as the code office working together in the planning office, looking at this impact of high density and dealing with some of these design issues and design standards and such that right now we don't have. Any other questions?
Yes. Thank you. I do appreciate Member Bain's historical references there, obviously being relatively new to council and fairly new to Athens, relatively speaking. I've been here since the late 80s as a student, but I was terribly naive to city issues at the time, completely engrossed in my own little selfish world as a college student. But I did have questions as well pertaining to the parking, and I've tried to do some research on this. I've spoke with Public Works Director, I've spoke with the Code Director, I've had a number of different conversations with members of the community trying to get a take on this, because I do want to look at this from all sides. And so to hear Member Bain's possible suggestion at tackling this from the parking standpoint, that's an interesting idea as well, which I'm definitely considering and looking at. In some of the conversations I've had about parking, which we were alluding to briefly here with the mayor, some of the spots probably won't change or transition over. For instance, my understanding is the Historical Society has anywhere from, 8 to 10 spots, parking spots. The jewelry store has a number of spots as well, and they're likely to probably, both those entities are likely to probably keep those spots. I don't think those spots will disappear. Same thing probably for the Passion Works parking lot and the spots that are rented out by the BP gas station. So that's a number of parking spots that will not disappear, will remain the same, I'm guessing. So those would be cars that would not spill into the neighborhood, would be my take on that. And I do definitely appreciate the issues that Member Fall also raises with noise, as did Member Bain, because I could hear the High Fest, and I live almost a mile away. It's a good 15, 20-minute walk for me to get uptown from where I live on 2nd Street, and I could hear it all day. That's problematic in my opinion. That's not kosher. That affects people's quality of life. So I don't have a problem per se with the density issue building, as maybe others have alluded to, but I would perhaps require or view the necessity to have limitations on balconies. I think if there were any more apartment complexes to go in that space, I would feel that balconies would be not wise or should be opposed or should be written into code to not happen. In general, I'm of the opinion that apartment complexes are quieter than houses that have front porches and parties that take place on the front porches. That seems to be the consideration, that apartment complexes are contained and that what happens within is not as noisy. Now, I'm stereotyping a little bit, and I'm sure that's not the case always. So I definitely welcome more input on this. I don't have all the answers. I'm curious about the direction. I sincerely do appreciate the historical background information. I did not. That helped me a lot in thinking about how we got to be where we're at regarding zoning. And then a question for the mayor. Am I correct that under the new, if it were to change, if it were to change to B2D, there would be more restrictions on signage? Is that correct? That would be something that would be...
No freestanding signs. I think there are some, I forget the actual difference, but I think there are some restrictions, yes.
Okay. So
But, yeah, but signage was not a big problem for most people outside the neighborhood.
it can be a quality of life. I mean, the state of Vermont outlaws billboards throughout the whole state. It's
We don't have
quality of
billboards
life.
in the city except the ones that kind of encroach in.
Right.
The little fiddly bits that are still right next to our roads.
And then the last thing I thought I'd just mention too is something that I think the code director mentioned in the newspaper, and that is the safety issue, because we have a fair amount of empty buildings or businesses that are there's nothing happening in them, and that's a safety issue. The fire chief has also acknowledged in the past that an empty building is not safe, that they're more susceptible to arson. And we also, I think it's sort of unfortunate that we don't have that we have empty buildings on Court Street, that we don't have viable businesses enhancing the quality of life. And so I like that idea of zoning perhaps helping the beautification or the push forward for more uptown revitalization. So those are concerns I have. I don't have all the answers, and I appreciate everyone's input on this for sure. Thank you.
Mayor Wall?
When you talk about balconies, I don't think there's anything in code that restricts balconies in any zone that I know of.
Right.
So if you're, at that point, you're talking about trying to revamp either the housing code or the zoning code.
Right.
And again, I don't know how you do it. I mean, you could put it in, but...
I mean, I think that this is one of the issues of the increased density, and I would take, I think that how you design a building, like the Palmer place, and that's not necessarily designed the best way, because the senior center there, it's just kind of all focused down into the senior center, and that, I mean, there's better ways to design, and right now we don't have any discussion in our code about design or reducing the amount of, I mean, I've tried to look at, last time we talked about like outdoor eateries and having patios. I mean, there are certain guidelines that cities have to talk about. If you have an outdoor eatery, you have to have awnings or plantings that reduce the amount of, and we don't have those. And so I think that we need to look at some of these issues that keep coming up because of density. I mean, we're kind of like letting density happen, and then we're trying to play catch up. And it's not working out. We're playing catch up with the noise ordinance, with the roof ordinance, with all these other types of ordinances, and we need to do it as a whole entity of looking at this sort of thing and the quality of life. And I think that that's a big issue. Is there any other comments from council? I will invite comments from the audience. I would like to point out that we did have a public hearing on this, a whole long public hearing. That's fine. I'd like for people who have new information and comments or corrections from last time, or if they didn't get to speak last time, to come up. And Debbie's going to find people, please, and come up and state your name and what you represent. Welcome. Anybody? Nobody? Any more comments from council? Jim?
Are we going to answer the Planning Commission's request for an ordinance?
Well, I see it right now, if we bring the ordinance forward from Planning Commission, that it's not going to pass. That's my feeling. We can bring it up as an ordinance and see the will of the council, or we can take the Planning Commission, work with the Planning Commission, because if we change the Planning Commission recommendations, it will have to pass by a supermajority, which means from 6 out of 7. So I will entertain what people have to say in the next 2 weeks before the next committee hearing, and I can bring it up again. I just don't think that the ordinance is ready right now to bring forward, because I think that it would probably not pass, to tell you the truth. Even if we changed it, I don't...
Well, I'm not sure that we agree on language.
Right.
On just responding to the Planning Commission's request.
We will respond.
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's all I want to do. I
We
want
tried
to make
last
sure.
time, okay, just said, oh, we don't want it.
Well, but-
This time, that was then, this is now, right?
Yeah, I think we need to respond, which may be put an ordinance up and see where it goes.
Yeah. So I would welcome recommendations to put into the ordinance. Noah?
Question, the restriction in distance for parking, is that in Title 23 or is that elsewhere? Do you remember?
It was in the zone code.
Okay, it's Title 23.
Consistently been in there, one way or another.
Okay, just wondered. I forget whether it was in just general
No.
or traffic.
You were trying to get out of seeing it again, weren't you?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. It sounds like a plan to me.
I'm honest.
What you said.
So, can you come up? Thank you.
Jim Sillery from 36 Fairview Avenue, Northside Neighborhood Association. I appreciate what Ms. Fall said about providing a buffer between business and neighborhoods. And in fact, that's what the B3 zone, I think, was designated to do, because the B3 zone exists only where there's a business zone that abuts an R1 neighborhood. And it provides for smaller buildings, less lot coverage, and more parking. So I don't believe that we're talking just about a parking issue, but I think that the density and increasing the density obviously increases the noise. And I know that the proposed ordinance only goes the B3 zone down as far as West State Street, but I'd remind council that the B3 zone goes completely down Stimson Avenue. And any change today or in the near future in that B3 zone just down to West State Street is going to be revisited someday in the future down Stimson Avenue, because those business owners, future business owners, will be before council and make all of the same arguments that we're hearing now about changing the B3 to B2D to allow them to eliminate parking, to increase the size of the buildings on their lots, and bring in more people to that area. And we've got the east side 1 block away. Thank you.
Any more comments? So I think that this needs more work, and I will entertain comments and suggestions, and we will bring it up in the next committee hearing.
Thank you.
Okay. Title 41. Another exciting topic. This has been something that's been on council's plate for a while. And this is the Title 41, which is the site plan review. Something that was, I felt that was important, was to have a review of it after it's been in place for a certain amount of time, so that we can work out some of the bugs in it and language that doesn't make sense or that need to be looked at and addressed. And we worked together as a committee of developers, the Chamber of Commerce, zoning, code enforcement, and the planning office. And we came up with a series of definition changes, recommendations for different types of approvals that need to be done, including wellhead protection, flood hazard areas, and those sort of things. We brought it up at another committee member, several committee meetings several weeks ago. There was some issue and questions about the 3-unit residential buildings that Nancy had, and okay, Nancy still has those. Can you just discuss those?
Yeah, can I borrow this?
Yes.
Okay. So when we were doing the plan, the third planning group, Hogemeyer, talked about, I discussed my discontent with the really dense areas, R3 zones, where houses were changed into units with balconies that housed 15 people or more on an eighth of an acre. And I thought it was a total misapprehension or misinterpretation of zoning. I mean, there was some really creative stuff that went on where they had a pole that supported the house and parking underneath it, and they thought that was pretty cool. I personally don't think it's so cool because I think it creates a very the same density problem. I mean, next week or 2 weeks from now when we have our Palmer Fest out thing, maybe it'll be mellow this time, maybe it won't. Maybe there'll be a fire, maybe there won't. But I do think that we have way too many people in remodeled housing, whereas I see newer housing going in that's there. I would like to argue that when you make we put in the site plan review process, what we were hoping to avoid, if not now, in the future, I mean, it can be perfectly wonderful, the interpretation of the zoning code now, but bring in a new administration, bring in new people, and, sometimes they get sweet-talked by the people. I mean, I just think it's safer to have the 3-unit residential zone that are just below the commercial cutoff, that are 15 people on an eighth of an acre. It's almost as dense as the Bowery in 1890. Okay, I'm exaggerating, I'll admit it. That are currently required to go through this. I don't know that we have enough experience with this. I think site plan review is the daylight, is exposure of decisions that are made. I have perfect confidence in this administration, but I've served with several. And so let me just say that I would like to see it in there because I've seen misapplications and creative interpretations. Therefore, I'd like to, until we are really sure that it's perfect and it'll never change again, that we won't do this. Because most of our problem areas are R3 zones that have too many people living in them in remodeled houses. And so that's my basic argument. I didn't want to seem cranky on two things, but I do think there's a life quality thing going on here. I mean, I think, like, if you go to the Stewart Street, Mill Street T, that development there, it's built on a lot. It got some variances. I think it's very well designed. It seems to be a very popular place. But then if you go down that street, you can see a wide variety of developments, some of which aren't nearly as wonderful. And many of them don't have room for a garbage can, of all things. It's like, what's going on in their heads? So, I'd like to see the light of day on it. I may be the only one.
So you would argue for the
continuation of it until we're absolutely sure.
So you would want this original language?
The original language, if possible. I don't know if I'm all by myself on this, but the last time when we were doing this, actually, I don't think there are very many lots that aren't under permit. I think they're all holding building permits. So if I was really seeming cranky today, I was going to not just back off on it. So unless we rezoned, it wouldn't be an issue. But I think that the exposure is good. And let me go back and say, I don't think we've had enough experience to really know that it's good, that it works the way we have it. I would really like the Planning Commission, once they get through their current agenda, I wish they'd look at the nonconformities part of our code. I told the planner that 2 years ago. I thought, of all the things that are misapprehended, that has to be it. No, 1 year ago. It was only a year ago. And I know he's had more than enough stuff on his plate, but eventually, you've got nonconformity by use, nonconformity by bulk control, nonconformity by this, nonconformity, and you know how confusing it is. And you can pick out the language in one of the nonconformities and take it over to here and use it. And I think that's where most of the misapplications happened in the past. I think it's out of date. I mean, I know it's out of date, but okay. So if you could think about that, please, then I'd be willing to withhold my crankiness on this other thing.
I agree with some of the crankiness. I think something that's to be said about the site plan review is that it's not, the aim of it is not to prevent construction, but to give sunshine and to provide for better planning and better design. And I think that this is the roundabout way of trying to instill better design for density. Here we are talking about density, and so I would also encourage the planner to look at some of these lot coverage. I think is, I think that these are issues that we need to deal with as a city, is the density issue. And coming from my planning background, better planning and better design makes for less problems. I think that if Palmer Place was better designed, we wouldn't have as many problems.
And that did not go through site plan review.
Right.
It did not go through council. It was a single unit interpretation, which is why we have site plan review, because we said it is time for sunshine in this case.
Yes. And so I would be happy to go back, because I think that we are still dealing with density, and this is one of our things, that single titles that we really look at density and try to deal with its impacts, though the intent is not to prevent it, but just to better plan for it and help the planning and the design of it. I would have no problem with going back to the original language in the original Title 41 with this particular thing. I would present that as the ordinance, if people felt comfortable. A lot of the other things that are put into this ordinance, into the changes, make a lot of sense when it comes to providing information and working with the planning and code office and those sort of things. So I think that it would help to address sunshine and help also to provide for design and planning for the developers. Yes, sir.
I just want to say that I agree with you. I think that would probably be a good idea. We can't go wrong by having more public input, or at least an opportunity for the public to see what's happening. Sort of a related issue, density. It seems like hopefully the city will be looking at that. I'm not sure in what capacity, but it would really be useful to look at that. If the student population is going to increase like it's being reported, then students have to live somewhere. In the single housing neighborhoods, a lot of people don't want students there. A lot of people do. But are they going to be living in houses? Are they going to be living uptown, the lower end of Court Street, in these large, dense, close-in, 15 people in an eighth of an acre? But it's a question undoubtedly we will be addressing in the upcoming couple of years, I'm sure.
And I'd like to point out some of the development on Stewart and Mill Street is really well designed. I mean, it has, it addresses the issues of, parking, garbage, green space, and those are the ones that I've seen that the developers have taken the time to really work with the city through the Title 41 process. And I think that's we should point out that some of them are great looking. I mean, there's one going up now that's really nice. I think that you can have apartments and high-density development that's infill, that's well-designed and well-maintained, that benefits students. Because students, one thing that I found this thing is that it assumes students don't care about density, and students are impacted by density that surrounds them. And from my understanding, my discussions with students, Nancy's discussion with students, they are. And so we need to treat them as much as a citizen of Athens with the same rights and sunshine laws as R1 and R2. So.
And along with, just to make one point, I think a lot of people like a mixed neighborhood as opposed to a totally segregated neighborhood. And I think we have many successful ones throughout the city, and I think that's an important point to make. It's not. This is not anti-student. I think quality of life is important.
Thank you, and I didn't mean to...
No, I know. I just wanted to underline that, because I think that people think that maybe, since we're always talking about noise, that we're but I do think quality of life is important. Those are the quiet neighborhoods where the students live, right?
So I will, Kent?
Thank you. I, too, just wanted to acknowledge that I support the suggestions that have been made by you and Member Bain and Member Ghazi, and that I will reword or re-acknowledge the better design and better planning, and it makes sense. And I think in the long term, for the future of Athens, long beyond past when we'll be here, I think it is wise for us to take our time in looking at this process and having the measures in place to aid development. Thank you.
Just one last thing to add. Through the Tree Commission, I've seen people that have to bring these Title 41 plans through, and the city works very hard to expedite the process and to make sure that it's as simple as possible, whether it's the John Paskey, Ron Lucas, or Paula, who I've all seen dealing with these Title 41 applications. They do their best to make sure that it is done efficiently and quickly.
It's only about 2 years old, right, the process, so that it works so well is a good sign.
Is there other comments? Concerns? I will bring this up for reading next council meeting with the new language. We'll send out the ordinance beforehand so everybody can okay the language. So,
Councilmember Fall, I do have a miscellaneous that just hit my desk
Okay.
today, so it could possibly be
miscellaneous?
discussed.
Yes.
It is a application for revocable license for a fence for 55 Elmwood, and it's to replace an existing fence that is in the city right-of-way that has been in existence for over 4 years, didn't have one before, and they did receive BZA approval, so I'll get this to...
Is it all, it's complete and every...
It should be by the end of the week. We need 2 more sign-offs.
Okay.
So, but I
Great.
think it's supposed to delay.
On Elmwood?
55 Elmwood. Been there for 40 years, didn't know it was in the right-of-way,
this
and
the
then
one
went to
with
the
the pool?
BZA.
Yes. So it's fencing in a pool? Is that... I think it's the one fencing in a
Debbie
pool.
saying yes.
Is it? Yes. So that's important.
I didn't get that. I have it, Derek.
So I will bring that forward. Straightforward. So, any other miscellaneous environmental planning and development committee thing? Thank you.
Okay, Finance and Personnel, we only have some miscellaneous, and we might have several miscellaneous. Auditor, did you have something?
I don't believe I do.
Okay. However, I know the Service Safety Director has several things to talk about.
The Visitor Center, not so much time back, you authorized $3,000 for us to proceed for engineering and architectural and state permit fees because of a structural issue there. I still do not have a dollar amount, but it looks to be less than $10,000 for the structural support that is needed to support the second floor of the Visitor Center. And also, we want it wrapped to look, of course, like that. So once we have that final figure, I wanted it discussed in committee so that we can get that to the auditor and have that in an appropriations ordinance.
Okay. Could we all remember, this is the second floor, actually interior to the Mansfield house. The city moved that house to that location, rents it to the Convention and Visitors Bureau for their offices, and so we maintain it. It is our building, so it is our responsibility to do this. So as soon as you hear something, let us auditor know, and we'll bring up an ordinance. Member Gasby?
Is this a structural work safety issue with the building? Or?
It is indeed, actually. The director has said to relocate from her office down to the first floor until we can get this. It's not imminent danger of a collapse, but it needs to be done.
We don't all want to be in that room at the same
You
time.
cannot be.
We had an engineer look at it and said, it has to be worked on. It's essentially an old building. It's a log cabin type structure, and wood does get old. There's a lot of, I went out and looked at it a week and a half ago. There's a lot of flex up in there. They cleared out the room there, but you can feel it give a little bit there. So it needs to be fixed.
And weight limit. You had another one?
two more, if I may. What? We haven't, since we didn't meet, but I am have the request in front of me from the police captain who oversees parking enforcement division. We do have a soon 30-year employee who will be retiring, and the request is coming before council about replacing this position. There are some figures here in terms of what a single parking enforcement officer generates in revenue. At this point, of course, this is a 30-year employee, looking at a cost of about $52,000 per year, generating about $84,000 in revenue. So it's supposed to remain revenue neutral. I kind of just threw this one at the auditor also, so because we are under what you still consider a soft hiring freeze, that's why I wanted to bring this to council.
But it's a replacement.
It is a replacement.
It's not in the line item.
No.
And really, when you talk about revenue, what you're saying is that, we have them circulating the city at a certain, frequency. You cut back and you lose that frequency, as well as we have the ones going out in the neighborhoods with the Jeep. So you take away one of those and something's going to fall through the cracks.
So I think everybody's for it, but when would the officer be, the employee be hired? Probably this summer?
We're not sure exactly.
This employee will be retiring in May, I believe the end of May. So we're almost to May 1st. You probably won't get on until the...
Well, we have some expenses, Paula, I was thinking about at the end of the term, and so we won't be, it'll be covered in that gap.
Yes. The pay,
For once, the
buyout,
gap
sure,
seems
sure.
good.
Should be. So.
Do you have a third one?
I do. I have one other thing. Due to the nature of this past weekend, and again, fire set in the street, and having to get the entire street cleared in order to even have emergency response, I've talked with the police department about exactly what do we need to be able to respond to these. We have 2 more full weekends of fests. Fest on Friday night, fest on Saturday night, fest on the following Friday night, a fest on the following Saturday night. In order to cover those costs, I'm looking at an additional cost of almost $22,000 to have adequate police force on scene, and probably close to $10,000 for fire department. I feel that we'd be remiss to not have the forces in place in case of similar events occurring. Palmerfest is 2 weeks away on Saturday, May 8th, and the following weekend would be Millfest. There is, my understanding, and I just threw this at the auditor also, possibly some money in their budget, but it may mean, as we get towards the end of the year, that we may need additional appropriation into those line items.
So what are you asking?
I'm making you aware of that
Okay.
possible cost and the fact that we may need to have an additional appropriation in order to adequately cover for their own security, for their citizen safety.
So at this point, the appropriation would be after the fact.
If we run short at the end of the year. That's what we're letting you know, that we'll probably be dipping into other transaction classes just to make up the difference. Realize this past weekend also included some street costs, too, for just getting the street sweeper out. So these are not revenue-neutral fun party time events.
No,
So-
we understand.
Okay.
33,000 is a small. You're not getting out-of-town people in?
We've discussed it. We absolutely have. For Halloween, for example, we've spent about $7,500 to get up to 50 officers at $150 per person.
You mean 75,000?
75,000.
I'm not doing that right.
No, sorry not.
I was told about to have $7,500 total. Let's not get 50.
I think we're running about $150 per officer for that event, weekend event. One day, I think it is, actually.
And then money for horse feed and all that stuff.
Mounted actually are
They
less.
actually mostly do that in a collaborative effort, and then, yes, we provide some food and what have
It
you.
depends a lot what's going on, but it seems like it's good that you're prudent about it, so we don't have any
You know, once burned, twice shy. We had Palmer Fest, we talked about it, we had a pre-planning meeting, and this still occurred. And
And
I'm
10 years
seriously
before-
disappointed.
10 years earlier, it wasn't at all. So maybe this year we'll be lucky.
50 times 150 is 7,500.
Oh, the auditor came to us.
Thank you, Kathy.
For the record, but that is a small piece of Halloween.
It is, yes.
Not 75,000.
Right. So you had a pre-meeting with the High Fest?
We had, yes, we had held it at Bromley Hall. High University was there, and we were there. We had the Dean of Students was there, Jim Sands and Judiciary were there. Probably had about 19 students, including some community assistants. Message was clear. I saw the community assistants out handing out the information door to door. Alcohol, as the night wears on, I don't know.
I saw in the paper where I think it was Lieutenant Williams said that guests are the main problem. Do you agree with that? Is that...
But this is the issue, and this is what we discussed also. If you're holding a house party, you're responsible.
For your guests.
Yes, you are. And if you're holding a house party that you don't have controls in terms of who can come in and come out, once again, you're held responsible.
Remember, this is what Pat Lang brought up last week. He said, if you're serving somebody who's intoxicated, you're responsible at the party.
Or underage.
What?
Or underage.
Or underage, yes. So the same thing applies to any other activity that's illegal or a problem.
But the meetings are going to continue, I
Yes,
guess.
yes, we will have a meeting and blanket Palmer and Mill and invite all the, residents in the neighborhood to please come, please listen, because we need control.
And Resident Life has been very active in this, too.
That off-campus living office has been actually sponsoring all these. And they're sponsoring the Move Out Fest, too, that will happen.
Something that I'm concerned about is that there's other kind of unofficial fests that are happening earlier and earlier.
Yes.
And it seems that, in my neighborhood, there was one a couple weeks ago, and it was on Facebook, and it seems that there's more and more, and, as a city, these are getting to be very expensive. And that needs to be taken into consideration when we discuss these things. How, as a city, how do you recoup the cost? This is a huge issue.
The latest
We're
has
talking about
been-
laying off people.
You place a fest at the end of your street, and then it gives it some sort of legitimacy. That what we have to be able to respond and to have security measures in place for everyone's safety.
Thank you. Did you want to talk about this? Oh, the mayor was going to talk about...
What are we talking about? Bus?
I have a request for a metal detector at the police department.
That's not news to me.
That's correct. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Debbie would know more about this. This is an actual donation and how you accept that.
Okay. The police department applied for a metal detector for their for the law administration building next door, and this was U.S. government military surplus, but it's brand new. Turns out there were 70-some that were ordered for various military areas, and they're not used. So Athens City Police have received one. It's about $7,000 in cost. No cost. We need to accept this as a donation. So this is
Can we accept it anyway?
Clerk Walker's. Okay. And what all the city and/or the police need to do is pay the shipping, which is about $200 estimated, coming from Georgia. Yes.
Thank you. And for clarification's sake, this is probably not a metal detector for beachcombing, but rather something that you would walk through at the airport.
Yes, I'm sorry. It's a walk-through metal detector.
Okay.
Sam comes.
Right.
bring the sand with you.
Awesome. Super.
Probably similar to what you have at the courthouse, county courthouse,
Right.
I assume.
Well, we have to have,
I have no idea. This is the first I heard of it. I've been kind of on vacation.
In regards. No? Okay.
I thought we were going to raise money looking for diamond rings and...
In our thoughts.
Right. Strauss money.
In the beach.
Okay. I think that's
Yeah, sorry.
all
Yeah, the inner
miscellaneous
city
stuff.
bus.
This was kind of mentioned by, just stepping back before you move on to the next item.
Yeah.
Member Bain, you mentioned the possibility of having to staff this. Has that been, at the courthouse, they have to have someone there to run the metal detector and then
That would be news to me. That has not been relayed. And they certainly don't have additional staff
Right,
to
right.
stand around here.
curiosity?
We don't know.
And do you want us to bring up the bus thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Chris Nyes is not here, so it kind of collapsed over to the next committee meeting, but it's finance for the most part.
Okay, well, as you know, the Finance Committee and the Transportation Committee have been talking about increasing our connectivity with the outside. And we were pretty well connected for a while, till the 80s, and then 1980s, and then we lost it. And now, with the stimulus program, we have a chance to get a better connection, not only the lakefront connection we have, but Columbus and Cincinnati. And so if I'm making a mistake, stop me right now. I'm just on a roll. So what we're going to do is we're going to buy 3 buses because we were awarded stimulus money, which we will promptly contract to the agency that will be administering the system. Our only involvement with the buses will be to buy the buses, actually float a bond, buy the buses, recoup our bond, what we used, and then benefit from having the bus stop here, not the buck, but the bus, and having the sale of tickets happen at the community center. And so what we need to do is to follow Lakefront's recommendation, borrow about $1.425 million, which we'll have to float for 2 to 4 months to get reimbursement, including the interest. And then we're going to lease the buses to the chosen bus provider. We will be doing ticketing, I think. But HAPCAP, Hocking Athens Perry Community Action, will be the grant administrator. They have experience in this, so that gets us, and maybe we'll free Charlene up from some of the duties that are there. And we have, and so we'll have an ordinance up to authorize the auditor to secure this money next time, unless there are specific questions you want to ask the mayor right now.
Okay, let me add that what you're seeing is that we applied for this bus system to connect, as Nancy said, between Athens and Cincinnati and Athens and Columbus. At present, we have the Athens-Columbus route there. This is that previous grant, how it's structured, the deficit that Lakefront runs is about 50% matched by ODOT, which is about $140,000 a year, I think. This latest round of grants, they originally were trying for 4 routes. I think you remember that. I discussed it about 6 months ago. Really, 2 of the routes nobody even applied for. We didn't because it doesn't apply to us. It comes from Columbus outward somewhere else. We were the sole people who applied for this. We started looking at the having to hire staff and have wherewithal to administer this grant, but ODOT was saying that we could actually have a grant designee, administrator designee, which we put an RFP out for that, a request for proposal of that, and HAPCAP was the only one that came forward on that. They have experience with the Logan bus system. They're willing to take it on. So therefore, we will give them the authority to run the grant, which means pretty much we don't have to do anything except sign off on things occasionally. On the other hand, there's also they have a series of stimulus money for buses, 3 of them, somewhere about almost $500,000 per bus. And the intent there is that we would purchase those, get reimbursed for the purchase of it, and lease that out to whoever the bus entity is. The next step for HAPCAP is actually putting an RFP out for a bus system, Lakefront, Greyhound, Caravan bus, any bus service that's willing to take up the reins and run a bus system. as a result, they will get new buses, obviously, sooner or later. And I say sooner or later because I think it's longer than 2 or 3 months. The turnaround we're looking at is maybe 4 months. We've been told that Greyhound orders it and gets it delivered in about 4 months. We have to assume at least 4 to 5. What I need is, of course, upfront money to do this, of course, or a PO. The other thing is we'll probably need authorization to extend it until July. I think it ended at 04/10, I think, gets us to about 4 months. So we're almost at the end of that. So I probably need reauthorization to extend that. This has been recommended by ODOT because they realize it's taking time to get it rolling. So that's 2 different items right there. We will enter into a contract with Habcat. We'll probably have some say in how they generate their RFP for the outside bus service. And then at that point, we have an agreement to lease the buses to whoever picks up that, whether it's Lakefront or Greyhound or some other entity.
In the lease agreement, as we envision it, would include them
They'd be in charge of-
maintaining
yes.
the buses also. So just as far as we can see, we're gaining potential transportation to the Cincinnati area and back, and continuing our transportation system to the Columbus area and back. The Columbus bus run has been very successful, utilized by students and long-term residents of the area, and so we're hoping that Cincinnati works out the same way too.
And again, the ridership is from international students, Amish, and residents who don't have cars. I mean, literally, there's a spectrum of people who use it. And again, this is a program trying to connect rural areas with city areas, metropolitan areas. And they really ODOT really wants to see this happen, so they're helping us a lot. I have to give them credit for leading us by the nose to where we have to go, because it's new to me, and it's scary to think that we are the only ones applied for it, and the fact that we are trying something new. But you want to be connected to the world. I mean, just to turn our backs on it would be a mistake, I think.
Member Butler?
Thank you, sir. I want to acknowledge I support this. I think accessibility is terribly important, and if the state moves forward with the efforts to connect the big C's, Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, via the railroad system, I think then that makes it helpful for students coming to Athens, Ohio from the greater Cleveland area, that they could take a train to Columbus and catch the bus here as well. So, and also just, again, accessibility, getting to the communities and connecting the rural areas to the big cities, I think it's important.
Any student that can come down here on a bus, and I don't know how many come down, actually, I don't have a hard number, means they're not driving a car down here and parking it in your neighborhood.
Exactly.
Okay?
You give them free tickets?
No, it doesn't work that way. We'll do that for residents who want to live in mixed neighborhoods. How's that? We'll just import some, okay?
Member Gosling?
As with any bond, there's a cost associated with getting the money to the city. Would that be reimbursable to us?
I think that could be rolled over into the bill, the way I understand
Because
it.
that would be quite a substantial amount of money, wouldn't it?
I think the guesstimate I got from Ray earlier today was about, for 6 months, about $1.5 million is about $46,000 right off the bat. And that's assuming the lowest rate. I think he plugged in that last low rate that everybody was very happy with. But it's not going to, that gives us an idea.
There's no guarantee we would get that rate for that amount
Yeah, I
of
know.
money.
I'm aware of
But
that.
again, we are planning on being reimbursed for those funds from probably the contracts with the bus company.
I think I'd look at it as part of the cost of the bus, to tell you the truth, and that's where I'd roll it in on that.
I just want to make sure we can cover it.
I'm hoping we can. I'm pretty sure we can.
If we put it in the ordinance, you'll have to, right?
You want to put it in the ordinance?
No, I just meant if you just tell ODOT, it's in the ordinance, you have to do it that way. Just wondered.
We can do that, I guess.
Okay, I think we are done.
Moving forward on transportation, is that correct?
I guess so, yes, go ahead.
Wonderful. Well, I have to admit that I'm a little remiss here in not bringing all the information, but I believe that I'll be saved perhaps by the city service safety director on some details regarding Boogie on the Bricks.
Thank
Is that correct?
Yes.
And we do have a speaker.
Yes, we have Melody Sands
Wonderful.
here. She's with Boogie on the Bricks / Ohio Brew Week. In the past, you've closed one block on Court Street,
What's happened is this event keeps growing and growing and growing. And when they first came to us, that Boogie on the Bricks event, they said, can we get a little bit more from Washington there? Because the Ohio Brew Week also has their culminating event on the same day on the street. We've met again internally, and the proposal that we have to come before you now is indeed closing at Union Street, Court Street, all the way down to West State Street. It will also require closing of West State Street to Congress and essentially Washington Street from the parking garage up to Congress. It will allow for emergency vehicles. Some of the reasoning for this is that the fire chief has requested, and we can provide by having the full 2 blocks, 14-foot fire lane on the east side because that's where our hydrants are. This allows the vendors to set up all the way along on the west side, and will get rid of some of the congestion and just make it one big event. Did you want to speak to it, Melanie?
Hello, everybody. I'm Melody Sands. I'm the marketing director for Ohio Brew Week, and I've met with the mayor and other committee members of Ohio Brew Week. Have met with Polly and, excuse me.
That's all right.
That's the old Polly, long time ago. And Ron Lucas, and they've hammered out an arrangement that we think is good. It's being proactive. Our marketing is working for Ohio Brew Week. It is the economic engine in the summertime, especially since we lost the American Legion event. We know people are coming. We know they're coming not just for a day now, they're coming for the full week. We have 2 contingencies coming in from Canada, going to camp, I think. But our goal is to put beds or heads in beds all over the city and get, the bed tax. And so we feel that expanding Boogie on the Bricks and Ohio Brew Week space up on Court Street is proactive. It will add another level of coolness to the event because people love to come up there, but they don't necessarily want to be near all the music. They want to be down and relax and sit and talk with the brewers. This is to keep the brewers happy as well because they are kind of upset with the density. It's just really crowded last year. And so we feel this will diffuse the crowd. It'll open up some more space. It'll be just like kind of a loungy, more relaxed, laid-back atmosphere, which is what Ohio Brew is all about. And I just think it would be a really good thing to do for the city. I encourage you to support this movement. We have a crew of people, volunteers are going to come out and tell people to mind their manners and behave. So far in 5 years, this is the 5th year, we've not had any major problems. No one's burned a couch at all during Brew Week. Unofficially, we don't even think anybody's gotten a DUI during the whole week. We with all due respect to the students, we love you during the school year, but we don't really market to the students. We go for the older crowd because the beers are more expensive and have a lot more taste than Bud Light, and and so we're trying to educate the students a little bit about sampling instead of chugging, and that's what Ohio Brew Week is all about. And it's an older crowd. They come here to relax. They know beer. They hang out and taste and sample and spend money because they have expendable income. So it's a different crowd.
Melody, what's the dates again?
July 11th through 17th. We have a lot of new events planned that will diffuse the crowd again throughout the whole week and keep people very busy. And we just felt this would be a good move. And it will also open up the space for if there's any emergency whatsoever on the street. And Polly and Ron have graciously worked with us.
Paula. The Boogie and the Bricks is the 17th?
Mm-hmm. It'll be the 17th. They have, requested an additional hour closing in the morning. In the past, you've closed it at 8 a.m. They were requesting 7 a.m. for better setup time. You normally suspend the noise ordinance also so that this can occur. And again, we're going to be including those additional side streets. You also suspend the parking fees at the garage so that everybody can come in that way and park for free at the parking garage. We have also sent, Wendy Jackness has sent out, I have not heard back yet, to the AU, but the Athens Uptown Business Association to notify them of this pending change. And we've also viewed that as a possible opportunity for them to do additional sidewalk sales and welcome that day and the flavor of that day. So.
Oh, just one more thing I'll add is Ohio University has now figured out that Ohio Brew Week is very good for their alumni. And so they have put this on their website as an official alumni event. And so they're marketing it as well to every alumni from OU. So we kind of expect more people. So I just thought we should be a little proactive and make this work for everybody. Any questions that anybody have?
The alumni event, that only applies to majors in beer drinking? Or something like that? The ones with defined taste, I assume, right?
Right.
So only
50
those
million
alumni who pass those courses.
who've had Beer 101.
Okay. And you'll have cruise-in. What day would that be in that spectrum of Ohio?
The cruise-in will happen down at the Station Project area, where we have the Brewbecue with the cooking competition that the Big Green Egg, which is the largest ceramic grill maker in the world, it looks like an egg. It's about this big. It weighs 900 pounds. They're going to give one away. It's a $1,500 grill. And they have put Ohio Brew Week on their website. And we expect to get some eggheads here who follow festivals where they can cook on their little mini eggs. So,
Okay, sounds exotic.
it's fun.
The reason why I mention that, of course, is that we used to have 3 cruise-ins that closed down the streets in the summertime 3 times during the summer. We've actually eliminated one of those because it goes down to the station area. So in terms of impact to downtown, there's one less impact from the cruise-in, but we'll do a substitute with the extra block, I imagine.
Extra.
And the egg.
The egg. Does anyone have any questions or, yes, Christine?
I just want to support, this is a great event for Athens. I mean, I do homebrewing, so I know a lot of people who are really supportive of this, and I think it's great because it's also family oriented. Boogie on the Bricks is great because there's always the jumpy moon jump and all that sort of stuff that the services provide, and this is the sort of thing that we can get together with all different ages and do, and I really appreciate all the work all the volunteers do and stuff. We put a lot of work into this, so I wholeheartedly support the expansion too. It's more microbrews, the better.
And I'll point out that the students have very discriminating taste when it comes to beer because I've seen them in Jackie Ho's and I've seen them in...
They're learning. They're learning.
Okay, and I've seen them at the Casa drinking the microbrews.
Right.
They know it's good. Okay.
It's the largest growing industry in the country right now. Craft brew industry grew 13%, so we're right on the cutting edge. A lot of other cities are literally stealing our idea, so we want to keep them coming to Athens instead of saying, why go to Athens? I can hang out in Cleveland. Well, we're going to show them why by having a better event this year. So thank you.
Regarding miscellaneous, or do we need to acknowledge anything else regarding Brew Week or the expansion? Any other comments or input from community? So I'm guessing then we'll move forward. Debbie will move forward. Okay, thank you. I don't believe I have any miscellaneous. Member Nisley did call me last week to acknowledge she wouldn't be here, and I was just getting ready to hop on my motorcycle to leave work, so I wasn't paying attention very well to the conversation. My apologies. So I don't think there's any other miscellaneous, although there may be from the mayor's office.
Nope, nothing.
Okay.
Nothing transportation.
Super. Go Cavs. Thank you.